Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing a potential move for the Phillies bullpen in the wake of the Jeff Hoffman signing and a whole bunch of other stuff.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk radio space. I've been on 97.5 The Fanatic here in Philadelphia for 5 years, talking all Philly sports. I've also been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. You're subscribing to the YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube or if you haven't checked this out yet, go to Locked On Phillies YouTube channel and you get new notifications when episodes are posted. Just hit that subscribe button. It's free for you. It really helps me out, so I would appreciate that very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. For big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Speaking of the NFL playoffs, shout out the Eagles. Big win for them yesterday, giving some Philly love. Go ahead and check out our friends over at Locked On Eagles. So today we're going to lead off with Mailbag Monday, right? Partially because there's not a lot of big stuff going on. Some of the questions that I got were great, so I want to go through those. We're also going to discuss I got to make sure the Philadelphia Phillies star players are good this offseason because we got some crazy stuff going on. Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, we'll get into all that. And then the Phillies, last week, they put out their video yearbook for 2024. And I've had some people that were upset about that. And we'll break that down also in today's episode. But let's start with Mailbag Monday. So if you want to participate in the future in our Mailbag Monday segment, Friday or Saturday, like start of the weekend, I'm going to put out a tweet from my Twitter account at Connor Thomas 975, also from at Locked On Phillies, LO_Phillies on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And just basically ask for your questions in the comments there. So you can go there. You can follow the accounts. I would appreciate that. And you can also get your questions in. And we got some really good questions in this weekend's responses. So the first thing that I want to start with is a question that we got. Let me just pull up the guy's handle here so I can give proper credit, but asking about the relief pitcher market. So Sean Fitzpatrick, who was asked this question before, asked, could Dombrowski pull a sneaky stunner and add Tanner Scott to the pen? So Tanner Scott is a guy that he had a great year last year. In 2024, he had a 4 WAR as a relief pitcher. Went 9-6, 1.75 ERA. He had like 72 some innings, 72 even innings pitched between 2 teams with the Miami Marlins and the deadline. He was moved to the San Diego Padres. They acquired him for their postseason push. I mean, this guy's good. He was an all-star this past year. It was his best season as a major leaguer. And he's only 30. So, like, as a relief pitcher, age, not a worry at all for Tanner Scott. But the thing that I look at with him is there's a very good chance he's the best reliever still available out there on the market. A lefty, also something that I love here. I'm on Baseball Reference just to try and clear the numbers up. They have him as batting right, a relief pitcher when the universal DH has been introduced in baseball for multiple years now. Anyway, whatever. He bats right in case that plays into the equation for anybody. The Tanner Scott thing is interesting. It's weird. I should not overstate this, but it is a small part of the equation, right? He's a lefty. And I feel like the Phillies lefty-wise with Jose Alvarado and Matt Strahm, they've got those high-leverage dudes that you're like, okay, I like what I'm seeing from them. Tanner Banks. Can you have 2 lefty Tanners in the same bullpen? Would that get confusing? It's a fair question. No, but I kind of want to see like them replace Hoffman with a righty, a high-leverage righty. And I know you've got Jordan Romano. I don't know. I guess you could go either lefty or righty the more that I think about it. So it really is a minor issue. But something you have to think about when you add the last piece to the bullpen is the balance of the handedness. So that's fine. Tanner Scott is really, really good, but he's going to cost you a pretty penny. Now, the Phillies didn't want to pay Jeff Hoffman. And more is coming out about the Jeff Hoffman deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. not only did the Baltimore Orioles, who we talked about last episode, they nixed the contract due to a physical that they weren't comfortable with. The Atlanta Braves also canceled the contract because of the physical with Jeff Hoffman. So 2 organizations said, nah, the physical's kind of sketching us out a little bit. There's definitely something. When 2 organizations do it, there's definitely something to it. Also, thank goodness he didn't go to the Braves because 1, I wouldn't have been able to root for Jeff Hoffman anymore. And 2, I still think he's going to be good, even though people are nervous about the physical. But so I don't think the problem with not re-signing Jeff Hoffman was the money. I think the problem was we don't know if this guy's healthy. Now, if you're going to tell me like Estevez or Tanner Scott, Tanner Scott's probably the better relief pitcher, but one of those guys has been here and was a big impact in the bullpen, not just throwing wise, but like culture wise for that bullpen is like one of the veteran leaders, and that's Carlos Estevez. So could Dave Dombrowski pull this off and go get Tanner Scott? Sure. But the other part of the equation is potential trade of like a guy like Alec Boehm, and how does that affect it? Like it's hard to answer the question without knowing if the Alec Boehm trade is still a legitimate possibility. And I think it's a legitimate possibility. Again, remember, I'm not saying probability. I'm not saying more likely than not, because every day I'm moving more and more towards no, it's not going to happen. But if there's a chance that's going to happen, they're still exploring options. Well, you kind of have to figure out that, because you could trade for a guy who would throw in the bullpen as part of that deal. And there's a lot of different ways that could happen. And that wouldn't include a free agent like Tanner Scott. But could Tanner Scott be an option? If the Phillies right now are like, yeah, I know nobody knows it, but we're not moving Alec Boehm, and we don't have to go pay a third baseman in free agency or acquire one some other way. So our last move of the offseason is going to be to shore up the bullpen and get like a big-time reliever and spend some good money for an impact pitcher. Well, you can go ahead and do that. And that could be Tanner Scott for sure. They'd be able to make that money work. John Middleton, I don't think would have an issue with doing that. But that's the thing. You just got to get your ducks in a row first. So how likely is it? Well, man, it is tough to say. Is it a 0% chance? Absolutely not. Do the Phillies need a pitcher like Tanner Scott? Yes, they do. Could they go acquire him? I know it's a cop-out answer to say we'll see, but he does check a lot of boxes for what the Philadelphia Phillies need in their final move, or final major move of the offseason, barring a trade. One of the other Mailbag Monday questions we got, because I wanted to lead off with that Tanner Scott one, a 2-parter here from Luke. He starts off by asking, who are you more confident in for 2025? Ranger Suarez or Cristopher Sanchez? I think this is a really fun question. I might actually have to do a little bit more of a breakdown on this, give it its own full segment. So shout out to Luke on Twitter who asked that. I'm going to say that I'm more confident in – see, it depends what you count as confident. I think Ranger Suarez is the better pitcher, but I think Ranger Suarez is not very durable. I'm going to go with Ranger Suarez, though, because I'm betting on this one, right? It is a toss-up. It is a great question. You might say, well, Sanchez, he's going to be available. He was an all-star as well. Like, he's really good. He is really, really good. I think their ceiling as a pitcher, Ranger Suarez, is slightly higher than Cristopher Sanchez. Maybe a little more than slightly higher. And if he was as healthy as some of the other guys in the rotation, Ranger Suarez would be an absolute gem. But also, Ranger Suarez is heading into a contract year. He's got that motivation to get the bag. Meanwhile, Cristopher Sanchez signed an extension this past year. Ranger Suarez, the more motivated pitcher. I think the more talented pitcher, but not by a wide margin. And that's why I have more confidence in Ranger Suarez in 2025. And the second question that Luke has here, is the NL East the best division in baseball? Well, let's run through it and let's eliminate some. NL Central, all due respect, take a hike. NL West is interesting because you got the Dodgers out there and obviously defending World Series champions. Padres are solid. I'm just trying to run through the teams. Diamondbacks will probably have another one of those like kind of okay to good years where they'll be right on the edge of postseason contention. No, I don't think I could give it to the West just on the merits of the Dodgers. I don't see it. I know the Giants are trying to make their way back into that. No, I think the Phillies are the best, or the Phillies. The NL East is the best division in the National League. The AL East is interesting. The Orioles are really, really good. They just haven't had postseason success. Obviously, the Yankees were in the World Series. The Red Sox are trying to fight their way back into contention there. The Rays never have money, and they don't even have a stadium right now because the roof got ripped off Tropicana by a hurricane. So I don't know what the Rays are. Man. And, well, the Blue Jays are kind of interesting. There's a report that they might be in the lead for the Roki Sasaki signing. Now, he's going to, remember, Japanese star pitcher, 23 years old. He's been posted, so he can sign. He has to sign before January 23rd. That would be the drop-dead date for his posting. So if there was another division in baseball that could hold a candle to the Philadelphia Phillies, because it's not the AL West. I can't give it to the AL Central, even though I think Kansas City is like actually a solid team. And the Guardians were really good last year. I think last year was an anomaly year for the Guardians. No, I'm going to go ahead and say that the NL East is they're the best. I'll give them the best division in baseball, and I'm going to be slightly biased. I'm going to call it a tie between the NL East and the AL East, and I'm going to give the nod to the NL East because that's where the Phillies play. So there are your questions answered for Mailbag Monday. Again, I'm going to try and get to as many of those as I can when you do ask them. So we'll continue to do that every Monday through the offseason. If you want your questions answered, go ahead and throw them in there. And as long as they make sense and they're actual like logical questions like these guys asked, I'd be happy to go ahead and get some of the stuff you want answered on the episode. Now, coming up next, this is one of those fun like off-season topics. I mean, I guess it's fun, but we got to check in on the Philly stars. Like are you guys good? Type of conversation needs to happen based on some stuff that's been on social media and been circulating around, been viral today over the weekend with Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos. And it has nothing to do with the actual playing of the sport of baseball. So we'll get into that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel first. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. The best part about this deal, right? You don't have to do anything but wager the $5. You don't have to win. So let's say you went out and you bet the Green Bay Packers against the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday, and you watched the Packers lose 22-10, get smoked. Well, you would lose your $5, but you would get that $200 guaranteed in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. Now, if you bet that $5 on a winning bet like the Eagles, well, you would have gotten your profits and then also the $200 guaranteed. Like, it's just such a great deal. And it's like so much fun football this weekend. You absolutely have to do this. You cannot let this deal go by. And it's not just spread. You can run parlays, money line, props, everything, futures. It's so much of an opportunity to be able to bet with FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of our friends over at the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and have this conversation about what in the world is going on in this offseason with the Philadelphia Phillies stars. So let's start with Nick Castellanos because it's more baseball focused, right? Nick Castellanos went on the Chris Rose Rotation, a podcast, and this just came out today. I don't know exactly when the episode itself actually dropped, but I saw the video for the first time today. And Nick Castellanos was talking about National League MVP. And he said that Jose Iglesias of the New York Mets deserved National League MVP over Shohei Ohtani. Like, just face value, that's absolutely nuts. And he was adamant about it. And we know that Nick Castellanos doesn't really care what anybody else's opinion is. I mean, that's a guy who said Scooby-Doo was his favorite superhero. And we loved him for it. Like, I don't have an issue with him stating his opinion. And Jose Iglesias didn't have like a bad year. He hit 337. But in 270 at-bats, he only had 4 home runs. Ohtani went 50-50. So it's just like, obviously it's Shohei. Obviously Shohei's the MVP. But I think Nick Castellanos kind of made a weirdly interesting case, even though people are calling him insane. His argument for Jose Iglesias was him on that Mets team, like he had an impact on the direction of the team. He had an impact on the culture of the team. He really, according to Nick Castellanos, got all those guys moving in the same direction. Now, I don't feel good about a current Philadelphia Phillies player talking up the New York Mets. That'll never sit well with me just because of the rivalry. But Nick Castellanos' points were just like, hey, he got all of these guys focused and heading in the right direction and built that locker room culture, and also had a good year on the field, and they don't get to where they get without Jose Iglesias. And listen, go check out Locked On Mets. I don't know the impact in the locker room that Jose Iglesias had. Maybe our guy, Ryan Finkelstein on Locked On Mets will be able to tell you about that. But obviously MVP is always going to be an on-the-field award. It's going to be guys like Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge that put up gaudy numbers, that break records, that set like historic marks and everything like that. And that's the way that it probably always will be. But there is something interesting about thinking about MVP in the full context of a year of Major League Baseball. Like, not just, hey, how many bases you steal, how many home runs you hit, how many, what was your average, like all of that stuff. What impact did you have on your team outside of the numbers? What impact did you have on the locker room? How much do your teammates say, hey, this is our guy? How much do you lead? Like all of this stuff. Like, I get what Nick Castellanos is trying to say. He's just like, well, the value he added as a person and a player to the Mets was more valuable than like Ohtani going to the juggernaut Dodgers and joining Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and an already stacked team that had a direction, that knew what they were doing. Okay. So maybe like there's a different award that fits better for like best creator of culture for a team, best leader, something like that. And I'm sure like the NFL, they have the Walter Payton Man of the Year for someone who does the most like charitable stuff over the course of the year. And it's a high honor. So I'm not saying Jose Iglesias wasn't important to the Mets, but I understand why people are calling Nick Castellanos crazy. I just imagine an alternate Nick Castellanos universe where the MVP is decided that way. And it's a pretty cool thought. That being said, Nick, buddy, I hope you understand why people come after you for this take, because there is 0% way that Jose Iglesias or any person on the face of the planet would have been voted National League MVP over Shohei Ohtani. It's not even a comparison when it comes to the actual nature of the award. But Nick Castellanos marches to the beat of his own drum. People are going to call him insane, though. And people are doing the same thing with Bryce Harper, because Bryce Harper is just like, now, I'm not one to judge. These guys in the offseason, they get their work in, and then they're probably just sitting there around the house. They're probably bored, because playing 162 games in like 190 days is a grind. That's a marathon. Every day it's ballpark, batting practice, game, after game work. Go home late, go to sleep so you can wake up to get to the ballpark the next day. Oh, we're traveling, we're coming back, right? Like, you don't ever get that time to just sit around and just be like, oh, I'm going to relax today. Even off days, it's just like there's treatment you have to get done. There may be a travel day on an off day. You may have a team activity. So these guys are not used to having the time that they have in the offseason sometimes. And Bryce Harper, like, I don't mind how they fill up the off-season time with whatever they want to do. But Bryce is catching a lot of heat because he started putting together these videos of him making lattes and just like walking through step by step, like a TikTok influencer, how exactly he makes his coffee every day. And go off, King. I don't care. Make your coffee, make your videos. That's totally fine with me. Like, find your way to spend the off season. But I don't know. People are saying like he looks really tired in the videos and stuff like that. I'm not over reading into a Bryce Harper latte tutorial video. It's just funny that the Philadelphia Phillies stars, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, are starting to go a little viral on social media for these random like weird takes or weird videos or random stuff. That's how you know we're deep in the off season. Is you've got Bryce Harper making coffee and Nick Castellanos saying some player that absolutely should not have won MVP, should have won over a historical Shohei Ohtani season. So basically the whole point of this segment is we need baseball back. I need Nick Castellanos and Bryce Harper to get down to Clearwater and just put some batting gloves on and grab a stick and get up there and just start getting some swings in. Now, that's not me saying they haven't been working this offseason. No, I'm not faulting them. I'm not like, oh, they're not focused on getting better. That's not what this is at all. But it's just that point of the offseason where we're so far removed from baseball. It's just like, oh, well, I guess Bryce Harper is becoming Starbucks light, or Nick Castellanos is just jumping on podcasts and saying whatever. It's a fun thing, but it's something that's been flying around social media a lot recently. So I just want to talk about it a little bit. In case you haven't seen it, go ahead and check out the Nick Castellanos comment. Check out the Bryce Harper latte videos. They'll give you a chuckle. Like, what in the world are these guys doing this offseason? And please, for me, just for me, all right? Do not turn this into they're not focused on getting better conversation. Stop it. Both of those guys want to win. Both of those guys care about winning. Both of those guys are working to improve their game, even though they're already star caliber players. Okay? Coming up next, we are going to wrap up with something that, to me, is not even a question. But I understand that I am forced into being a little bit more logical than I think the typical fan with what I do for a living, getting to do this podcast and talking on air on the radio with 97.5 The Fanatic. But I've had a couple people talk to me about something that the Philadelphia Phillies put out on their YouTube channel last week, and that is the 2024 video yearbook. And I have a simple question for you coming up. You going to watch? We'll discuss as we wrap up today's episode. This is one of those how do you fan conversations. Like, how do you handle the disappointment of a season, the celebration of a season, the expectations? If there's something I love about talking sports, right? I love everything about it. But one of my favorite things is I love the psychology of the fan, finding out why people react the way they do to certain things their sports teams do. Also, why players react to fan base certain ways. The whole psychology of competition and this high level of expectations, especially in a city like Philadelphia, is so intriguing to me. Why do people think the way that they think? And this is one of those conversations. So the Phillies put out their video yearbook this past week. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I am 100% going to watch it because I love Philadelphia Phillies baseball. I love baseball in general, but I grew up on the Phillies. I talk about the Phillies. They are a huge part of the way that I make money, for my career. So, yeah, dude, I'm going to watch the video yearbook. For me, that's an easy decision. But I've had a couple people ask me, not podcast people, but people at The Fanatic, friends of mine that are not that you guys aren't my friends. Of course, we're all friends. Locked On Phillies family. We're tight. But I've been asked about the video yearbook and why would we watch that? And why would they make that? And why do you go about spending an hour and 10 minutes or whatever it is of your life watching back a season when it ends the way that it ends, right? So I guess the argument against the video yearbook, and the short answer for why do they do this is because they have to. Social media team works all year. The audio video team works all year. All of these folks put together all of these clips and everything like that. You have all of this work. They don't just start the video yearbook do they? No, I mean, I guess they do just start it when it ends, but they don't start gathering all of the video and stuff. The voiceover stuff starts after, so you can tell the story of the season in context of how it ends. But they have to. They want the social media clicks. They want to keep people engaged. They want to use all of the stuff they spent all season recording. So that's it. They're always going to have a video yearbook. But some people are well, why would you do this for a season that ended with a postseason collapse against the New York Mets? And I understand that there are some diehard Phillies fans. I'm not faulting you for this. They're I don't want to watch that. I don't have any interest in watching that because as fun as it might be to look back on a season where they won 95 games in the division for the first time in 13 years, you're going to hear me say that a billion times over the next, I don't know, however long until this next season really gets to the postseason, because I'm going to be fighting the fact that the Phillies were a good team this past year. They were a good team last year. But I get knowing how the season ends, you don't want to look back on it. And you don't want to get disappointed again because it's like watching a movie where you didn't like the ending. And it's like, how do you continue to rewatch that movie if you know you're just going to get annoyed at the end of it? Basically, it's this, you're going to have to stick with me. And I'll try and explain this as best as possible because I know not everybody watched it. But the original Game of Thrones, it's so hard to recommend to people because the first 6 seasons, it was an 8-season show on HBO. You know about it unless you lived under a rock, literally. But the first 6 seasons, I think, are some of the greatest television ever created. And then the last 2 seasons, in my opinion, were terrible. And I hated the ending, and a lot of people did. And it was a major disappointment. So it's just like, can you recommend something? Can you enjoy something where the first 3/4 of what you're watching is going to be fun and awesome and enjoyable, but you know that the final quarter or final whatever percentage of it is going to be heartbreak and disappointment and stuff that you never want to think about again. That's what's so tough about the mental part of the video yearbook. And I'm really intrigued. I'm going to need your comments I'm going to need your comments in the replies to this episode of if you're going to check out the video yearbook, if you think the Philadelphia Phillies should have made one, if you have any interest in it, this whole psychology of a fan. I am somebody who can separate the final result from the great moments in the season. I can enjoy when they show Tyler Phillips, local kid, throwing a complete game shutout for the Philadelphia Phillies. That is insane. That's an amazing moment. I can enjoy the type of year that a guy like Cristopher Sanchez had, a guy bursting on the scene in Major League Baseball. I could enjoy them talking about the Phillies having 3 all-star starters in the infield for the National League team. And while they're talking about that, or the trip to London, while they're talking about those experiences and stuff and giving you new insight into what goes into a baseball season, I'm not sitting there the whole time, arms crossed, brooding, saying, yeah, but they lost to the Mets. I don't know. I can take myself out of it, but I understand why other people can't. I think this would actually be a really therapeutic exercise for a lot of people who are down on the Philadelphia Phillies right now. I'm going to make my argument for why I think every Phillies fan should watch the video yearbook, or at least every Phillies fan who's down on this team saying they stink, they need major changes, run it back, what are they doing, I hate this organization, blah, 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 blah. And I'm overstating it for dramatic effect, but there are people out there that are very upset with the Philadelphia Phillies right now, how their offseason has gone to some extent, to how last season ended, and we were all upset with how last season ended. But I want you, if you're one of those people, and if you're willing to critically evaluate the way you think, if you're willing to question your own ideals, and I think everybody should, there are plenty of times where I have an opinion on something, somebody brings up a good point, or something changes about the point, or I am proven wrong by reality, and now I got to go back and I got to evaluate and be like, did I get that one wrong? Why did I get that one wrong? How can I make this thought process right? So I think everyone should try and grow as a fan, as a person, as someone who evaluates things in their life. And if you're a Phillies fan, this team is something that you evaluate in your life. Go back and watch, and just really watch, and think about how you felt in the moments where they were really, really good. Think about how you felt in moments in the collapse of the second half of the season. But remember all of the great things that this Philadelphia Phillies team did in 2024, because some of that just gets wiped from your memory bank when you see them lose to the Mets, and recency bias sets in. And I'm not faulting anybody for this. This is just reality. Recency bias sets in when you get knocked out of the postseason. You're like, well, wasted season because you didn't win the World Series. And that is a fair way to respond to the team that had the second best record in baseball getting knocked out in their first postseason series. This is not, we're okay with how the Phillies season went. It's, you can be annoyed, but maybe you need a reminder of how good this team was and how good they can still be. And the video yearbook is a perfect time to go do that and kind of remind yourself. And plus, it's John Kruk narrating it. So come on, you got to go ahead and listen to Kruk for an hour and 10 minutes, just kind of ramble on about the Phillies. It's a beautiful thing. It makes it feel warm, even though it's 30 degrees outside and we're in the NFL postseason and it gets dark at 4 p.m. still here in Philadelphia, and there's been snow on the ground for a week. No, it gives you a little taste of summer and baseball, and maybe a little hope for what the Phillies can still be, even if you're down on them for the way that last season ended. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Now, we're going to have off the poll on Wednesday. And I realized last time we did Off the Poll, I didn't ask the question here on the actual podcast. So you didn't know what the question was if you didn't go to the Twitter account. And in the previous time, I'd asked the question on the podcast. So I want to bring this up as far as confirming my thoughts on free agency, right? So the question is going to be, what is a more likely add for the Philadelphia Phillies the rest of the way in the offseason? More likely. They could do both these things. Would it be more likely that they add to the outfield again or the bullpen again? Easy pick two. And I'm very interested where the fan base goes. So you're going to have to go check out at LO_Phillies on Twitter, at Connor Thomas 975 on Twitter, or X, or whatever you call it. And I'll put that poll out tomorrow probably. Yeah, I'll put it out tomorrow morning. And you can go ahead and respond to that and just click your option, and we'll break down the answers on Wednesday's episode. So that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form, checking out the YouTube, hitting that subscribe button so you get notifications when new episodes are posted. And I'll talk to you Wednesday on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.